I posted a class cancelled sign on my history class door. I had made the decision to party instead of study for our midterm exam. In a last-ditch effort to rectify it, I arrived at class early and posted a note that read, "Class cancelled. Meeting in progress." I watched as students came up to door and quickly left. I waited until right at class time and burst through the door like I didn't see it. My professor and I waited with one other student who apparently didn't see the sign. He had a puzzled look on his face and went to class door, where he saw the sign. He informed us the test would be rescheduled. Of course, I moaned and said, "I have to study again." I did that to 2 more classes before I stopped for fear of them getting wise. I am not advising others to try this. It was a different time. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't get away with it now. Also, at the time I did this I was 100% saving my own ass. I was proud of myself when I did it, and it felt phenomenal not to get caught. But my buddy was one of those who weren't pleased. He had studied his butt off only to turn around and do it again. This friend actually threatened to expose me if I didn't quit goofing off and apply myself. I did. He is the only person who knows the truth many suspected, but he knows. This was a low point in college, not a highlight. It is much better to be prepared and make the grade. I'll get criticized for making this all after school special PSA, but I don't care. Better that than not making point. I did something that was 100% a selfish move. I can laugh at it now. Reminds me of a similar story from a few years ago. I remember missing the deadline for some of my English language coursework, so I went online and found a file corruptor and emailed the corrupted completed work file to my teacher, who was baffled and gave me an extension because that was my only copy. What on earth am I going to do now? I'm still waiting for my Oscar to arrive for that performance. Done something like that before. It was in chemistry and I was screwed on this test. So, instead of doing the test I scribbled a bunch of shit and notes on our scratch paper and turned that in. Took the test home and finished it with the help of Google and waited until I got an email from my professor saying that I accidentally turned in my scratch paper instead of the test. I apologized profusely and told her I would look to see if I had the test, and by some miracle I found it. Turned it into her the next day and passed. But I still feel a little guilty. All Bachelors of Science degrees at my school require at least a 3.0 GPA to graduate, be average, such as economics, finance, engineering, computer science, etc., and I just go to a basic state university. So no, C's really don't get degrees unless you're doing Bachelor of Arts like religious studies, psychology, etc. This past semester was supposed to be my last, but finished with a 2.97 GPA, so I'm taking 2 easy extracurriculars this semester to hopefully get over a 3, costing me another $4,200 for those 2 classes. I had something kind of similar in my quantum chemistry class back in college. It's one of those classes that will make your brain bleed no matter how smart you are. Someone tried to pull the same stunt you described by putting an exam cancelled notice on the door. But I had studied hard and was ready for it. I saw the professor in the room through the little window and asked, "Is the exam cancelled?" The professor asked why I would think that, and I had to tell him that someone had put a sign on the door saying it was. The professor got really angry and ripped the sign off the door, but I was still the only student who actually sat there and took the exam. I absolutely bombed it. I got something like a 30% score. But I suppose the professor appreciated that someone actually showed up and took the exam, and he asked me, "You won't like the score I gave you. Would you like me to leave the room so that you can take it again?" with a little wink. I totally cheated. The professor had left, so I was the only person in the room, so I totally broke out my textbook and read from it while I was completing the exam. I'm pretty certain the professor knew that's what was happening because he gave me a really big wink when he graded the exam a second time and gave me a 100% grade. When I was in high school, my woodshop class was during the lunch period, so a great time to walk around outside and socialize. And it just so happened that our instructor had his open hour in front of this. He was known to take naps in his office, so on a few occasions the clock was turned forward to look like it was time to go to lunch. He fell for this several times. Someone would knock on his door, telling him class was over and time for lunch, and we would go our merry way. This reminds me when I took nutrition in college. It was an easy class and I skipped days often. One day I screwed up and skipped a test day. The grade was mostly just test, very little assignments. So when I realized my mistake, I went to the male professor's office with a mostly bullshit excuse of my brother trying to commit suicide. He had a couple months earlier and started to break down and cry. Most men do not know what to do when a woman is crying in my experience, and my professor was one of those men. He let me come in to take the test a week later. In my defense, I can only think of one other time I fake cried to a man to get out of trouble, unless you count my dad. Back in the 70s, I pulled a variation of this. Didn't study for a vocabulary test, so I took 3 tubes of super glue from home, went to school, and squirted glue in each door lock and gate lock. This complete success was achieved when arriving at school the next day to see thousands waiting for the school guy who didn't have bolt cutters. 2 classes were cancelled. Yeah, for me. A victimless crime.